Well, welcome everybody. It's great to be here for this lovely happy hour. Shawn Rhodes here. I get to be your host. Joining me is Jeremy Knauff. He's dealing with some tech issues right now, but I'm happy to kind of take this and run with it. Hey, let's just go over some basic housekeeping here. There's a lot of different ways that you can interact with us today. Especially if you've got your happy hour drink going on. Want to make sure that we're all able to do it because this is a conversation. So a lot of you got to meet me at the UTC event that we did in Texas a couple of years back, probably more than a year now. If you've seen me before and you ever got to see me in Texas, go ahead and raise your hand. Let's practice using this great facility that we have inside of Zoom. Carnell, great, you're here. Klaus, Aaron, Lee, perfect. Well, it's good to be back with everybody. So I can promise you're not going to get to hear all of my stories again, which is sad for a lot of us, I know, but hopefully we'll get to have a lot of fun and learn some stuff along the way here too. So a couple of different ways to interact. One, you could raise your hand. So we saw that happen just now. Another way to do it is through the chat window. And so feel free to, just general chat there, throw anything in there that you like. We'll monitor that as best we can. But if you have a specific question that comes up that you want to make sure that Jeremy or I address as in the course of the hour we have together, use the Q&A section. And you'll see the little Q&A box inside of your Zoom kind of menu. And you can either ask those questions anonymously or you can have your name attached. If you're going to ask something anonymously, that's okay. But if it's mildly offensive, then I'm allowed to be mildly offensive back. That's the rule of Zoom. So just keep that in mind. All right, so let's actually dig into it. I want to make sure that we have everybody here already. I know we started a minute or two past when we'd meant to, but that's okay. Carnell, sir, since you were the organizer, I've promoted you up. You are now, you have a seat at the high table, so to speak. If you'd like to chat, you definitely have the ability to do that. So go ahead, Carnell, and kick in if you'd like. We can definitely make that happen if you want to. So here we go. Let's roll into it and have some fun. I'd love to hear from the folks on the call. This is via the chat window. Okay, so pull up your chat window. We're going to use it now. I want to hear what you think happened in this picture that I'm showing you right now. What happened right there? What was that about? It looks like a bunch of boats, we think. All right, this is not like post bath time in the Rhodes house where I have boats just spread out everywhere. All right, for my little 2-year-old daughter. All right, hurricane, flash flood, good. Yeah, excellent. Tsunami, could have been a tsunami, absolutely. So storm passed through this area. Where were these boats when that storm came through? Where do you think they were? Were they at port or were they out in the water? Go ahead and jump that into the chat window. They were at port. Oh, we got a couple people said they were in the water. Both, could be both, absolutely. Most of the boats that were in this picture, and this is the aftermath of a hurricane, by the way, a U.S. Coast Guard photo. Most of these boats were tied into port when that storm came through. Now, the reason that this is important for the conversation we're going to have today, because we're going to talk about business crisis as it applies to telecom and the world that we're in, all right? If we decide at this moment to just anchor our boats in, we're going to get our ships rocked. That's the nicest way to say it. I almost let loose an expletive and Carnell would have had to punish me later, but yeah, bad things are definitely going to happen. Both for 200. Yeah, absolutely right. I love it, Dennis. Yeah, both for 200. Yeah, we need to make sure that our boats are not just tied safe to the marina, to the port right now. And I know that we wouldn't be here today to learn about how do we operate and thrive and pivot in crisis if we were just deciding we were going to bury our heads in the sand. But another great time to use the hand-raising function. Who knows of folks in our industry? And it may not be an entire company that's doing it, but if I asked you to name names, and I won't, raise your hand if you know somebody right now that has their head buried in the sand as it applies to this whole COVID-19 pandemic that we're dealing with. If you know somebody that is just, we're just going to ride this one out, basically. Yeah, a couple of hands come up, absolutely. Everybody knows folks like that. And again, and Jeremy will agree with me on this, it's the worst possible situation somebody could be in right now. So today is all about if our boats are currently a little too close to the marina, to the port, we're going to work on getting them a little further out in the water where it's actually safer and where, come to find out, we can actually innovate things in a new way. All right. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So in case you didn't get to see my keynote that I did for UTC, I'm going to walk you through very briefly. It's not going to take but more than a minute because I don't want to bore the folks that had to hear this one before. But for the last, dozen years or so, I've been running around the world studying organizations and helping organizations deal with just one thing. And that is creating a pivot point in the way they do business. Where that knowledge came from is probably the more interesting piece, because we thought we were doing all right in telecom. The entire world economically was in a pretty good place, especially here if you're a US-based company. We were doing all right at the tail end of 2019 and into the early part of 2020. And then the COVID-19 pandemic happened, and suddenly our world went dark. All of the strategy that we had planned, I know many of us are the ones that are selling the equipment and the servers and everything to the large utilities. We also have guests on this webinar right now. Our sales plan just got wiped off the map. All right, our revenue projections, whether we're a utility or whether we're somebody that serves a utility, gone. All right, and if we are operating from the mentality that we had in January of this year and the plans that we had and the way that we thought we were going to go about business this year, if that's the way that we're operating, we're not going to set ourselves up for success. And so my work in studying pivot points across industries didn't happen from sitting in a college classroom somewhere. I didn't want to get my learning that way. I actually wanted to get out there and see it firsthand, all right? And that started by studying the men and women like you see in this photo. So my work inside of the world of studying pivot points began with US Marines. And so I was actually embedded with these teams. Now, you could take one look at me, and those of you that were at the keynote, I don't really come off like you'd think of as a typical Marine. One, I don't like eating crayons, all right? Yeah, so if we have any Marines on this call, go ahead and raise your hand right now. I know Carnell's one. Yeah, Jeremy actually is one too. So yeah, a bunch of jarheads in the room. We'll try to keep it monosyllabic for Carnell and for Jeremy, not use big words. That's what monosyllabic means, Jeremy, in case you were wondering. But yeah, you're very welcome, sir. But my journey took me a couple of really interesting places, all right? And the reason that I show you this picture is I want to point out these Birkenstock sandals on my feet. So this is me at 17. I got those Birkenstocks on. Now, if you've ever owned a pair of Birkenstocks or made fun of somebody in a pair of Birkenstocks, go ahead and raise your hand right now on the Zoom feature there. I want to see some hands come up. Yeah, okay. So we've either owned them or made fun of them. They're kind of an interesting anomaly in our culture here. You could stop putting your hands up, guys. All right, you could keep making fun of me in your own time, all right? I'm done with your hands. Everybody's got hands up. All right, the reason I bring you this picture is I had to make a transition. I had to make a pivot. See, I learned that pivot points don't just happen on the personal or level alone, they happen on the professional level too. And so as I joined the US Marine Corps, I was given a really unique job of traveling with these high-performing teams like the kind that Jeremy was able to serve with as well, and actually study what are these men and women doing in these stressful, crisis-driven situations in order to pivot that allows them to actually come out better at the tail end. So you send 30 people into a house that's loaded up with folks that just have a bunch of ill intent toward them. How do they come out with all 30 people again? Those were the teams that I sought out and that I studied. Eventually, I crossed over military branches. I was able to do this with Green Berets and Navy SEALs and Air Force pararescuemen. And then was also able to go in and do this inside of Fortune 100 companies, and eventually realized, hey, a lot of things that the people are doing at the highest levels of business are being shared in crisis communication and crisis management and pivoting across the military and across industry. And so we've heard from the Marines in here so far. If you're with us right now and you are a military veteran, or you're the spouse or former spouse of a military veteran, go ahead and raise your hand. I'd like to recognize you folks in here as well right now. Bunch of folks, yeah. Love to see that. Thank you for your support, whether you were in the direct capacity of serving or whether you were supporting those who did. You folks are going to understand what I'm about to share with you more than most, so thanks for being here. So COVID-19 has taught us two things, especially in the world of telecommunications. One is how unprepared many businesses were for crisis and change. We were rolling along at a pretty good clip in a bull market, and all of a sudden the COVID pandemic hit. A lot of us, our true colors are unfortunately beginning to show right now, and that we were just grossly unprepared for this. And the second thing that this has showed us, at least internally, Jeremy's going to deal with the external factors. The second thing this showed us is this has accelerated the adoption of geographically separated employees. A lot of us, like Carnell, myself, Jeremy, we get to run our own companies, or we're blessed to be able to work from home. But a lot of us, and we're going to get to these, these statistics here in a second, a lot of us are now just working from home permanently. We don't know when we're going to go back to work, even after COVID-19 lifts and whatever that new normal looks like. And so this has really forced us into these two modes of change that are beginning to affect our operations, our profitability, our client retention, and our customer and our employee retention as well. So those are the issues we're going to be dealing with today. So let's talk about stats, just hard facts. 4 billion people have been confined to their homes as the result of this. Now, if we're in the world of utilities, you think this would do well for us, but it come to find out that it's giving us mixed results because people are late on their utility payments. They're not using their air conditioners for fear that that utility payment's going to come due and a lien is going to be put on their house. And we don't know what that future is going to look like. I know a lot of us on this call right now are doing everything we can to delay those payments as far out as possible because we know how much our customers are hurting. Another thing that's happened, commodity prices are crashing. Food service channels are being disrupted. Our telecommunication channels are being disrupted. All of the folks that used to use what we have, their world's in chaos. That puts our world in chaos. And so those are just the top line things of what is really happening right now. But what does this mean for us in this industry right now, for utilities and their suppliers? Well, we're end users now are postponing their payments, and that's affecting our short-term profits for sure, but potentially our long-term profits as well. Because if these people don't go back to work, they may not be able to pay us all the backdated dues that they're going to have on their bills for the utility payments. Second, uncertainty of when energy consumption is actually going to resume. We don't know when they're going to have money. We don't know when they're going to feel comfortable using that money. We don't know when the utility consumption of all the office buildings that are now currently vacant that we were cashing a pretty penny on are going to come back. And it's not bad that we were. I mean, I'm a capitalist at heart. I don't want any of y'all on this call to think otherwise. But that's revenue that's now not in our pockets. We don't know when it's going to turn back on. If we don't account for that today and we just sweep it under the rug and pretend it's not there, that's not going to be a good place for us come Q3 of this year. Future workforce composition is unknown for us. A lot of us working from home, a lot of us, and this is a great time to ask it already. Raise your hand if your company has had to furlough or lay off employees as a result of COVID-19. A lot of us, yeah, a lot of us. All right, and that's just the hard facts, y'all. I mean, nothing good, nothing bad about it. It's just the way it is. Well, when we get those people back, if they come back, how are we going to reintegrate them? How are we going to onboard new employees once the COVID-19 pandemic actually happens? And I appreciate the typo. Thanks for that. It's good to know that I have people on this call that are looking out for me. And then finally, what do we need to do in the long and short term? And so, I'll make sure that actually appears correctly next time we get to see the full word resume too. So let's actually dig into this. What can we do? Okay. Today we're going to talk about profitability in a crisis. We're going to talk about establishing contingency plans for if this crisis continues longer than we think it will. What do those plans look like? How do we integrate them in our organizations? And probably most importantly, how do we get buy-in from the leaders in our organizations? And then capturing processes for line workers, also important. So the people that are most likely to be furloughed if this continues are the people that we're going to most likely have to onboard new people once our consumption rates begin to resume. What are capturing processes for these folks look like so that we can improve our onboarding time and ultimately improve our employee retention? And then finally, establishing plans for what we can control. What's within our control? How do we build a plan to hold our people accountable to executing it? Those are the things we can do. So let's talk about profitability in a crisis, all right? If you're from the great state of Texas, I want you to raise your hand right now because you probably know who this guy is. Great state of Texas, raise your hand. Oh, I love it. All right, we got a bunch of people. Carnell, you got a bunch of folks from Texas in here. You really got to redo the way that you think about your membership, all right? I love Texans, but they're loud, all right? Because normally when I ask that question in a room full of people and we're all live, you know what I hear from the back of the room? Woo, Texas! They're crazy. They love their state. And that's why they probably know who this guy is. In case you don't know, fellow with the eye patch, his name is Dan Crenshaw, all right? He's in the House of Representatives from the great state of Texas. Probably more attractive than that is the fact that he used to be a Navy SEAL, like the frogmen, wearing the cool masks and the cool guns and running all around the world doing the crazy stuff that they do. That was his former life before he decided he wanted to go into public office. He has a quote that I think really, really applies to the time that we're dealing with right now in the telecom and utility industry, all right? He said that failure becomes inevitable the moment that it is embraced as a possibility. Now, those are words to live by, but especially true today. Failure becomes inevitable for us the moment that we embrace it as a possibility. Now, while most of our organizations are in no danger of going under as the result of COVID-19, what is in danger is the profitability metrics, the sales numbers, the revenue numbers that we had put into place earlier this year. And while we may have to adjust those, there's no reason that they shouldn't, that we have to wipe them off the table completely. Because in my mind, that's failure. So our question today is, how can I regain as much of my profitability as possible? How can I control my P&L as much as I possibly can? Maybe innovate some new solutions that weren't available to me before, this particular session that I can begin using to get my folks more on board with getting out there, doing the things that we know they need to do to get that profitability back up to the highest number we possibly can, even if we're never going to make those Q2 projections that we had in the middle of a bull market last year. So what does this mean for us today? Well, I want you to take a look at priorities, goals, and initiatives in a new way. So whether you're controlling a division, an entire company, wherever you're at there, we're going to take a look at one thing as it applies to our goals and initiatives, because they're definitely not what they were pre-COVID. And the one thing I want you to look at right now is what is essential. All right. We had these sales goals of achieving X. We had these goals of being able to bill out this many hours in utility consumption, whatever that looks like for you, whatever vertical you're in inside of UTC's membership. We need to really carve it back and say, all right, what is essential right now for us? What is essential? If we achieve only one thing, what is that one thing that delineates success across all other areas? Because right now, it's really difficult for us to take all of those fractaled goals that we have that were built for a bull market and try to wedge them and shoehorn them into the COVID-19 pandemic market that we all find ourselves in. And so carve it all back. If we only achieve one thing that allows us to meet that goal that we had for Q2, Q3, Q4 of this year, what is that one thing? And once you have that answer, and you don't have to build this tonight, especially if you're already like 2 margaritas in, all right? I'm not saying that I am, but this was billed as a happy hour, so there we are. But what's essential right now? That's the goal that we have to begin looking at in a new way, not with pre-COVID resources and all the things that are in play, but with the things that we actually have available to us today. And that means understanding a runway. All right, so raise your hand right now if you have a pilot's license. I'd love to hear from the pilots in the room. Cheryl, pilot, thank you for the work that you do, keeping your plane in the air. Okay, I just had Cheryl raise her hand. All right, so Cheryl's really going to get this analogy. A lot of other folks might. Bob, still got your hand up, maybe from a previous thing. I'm going to get the hands lowered here. Okay, perfect. So now we're all on the baseline. So what pilots have to consider as they're floating down the runway, and Cheryl can tell you this, is there's a point of no return, where if they hit that point on the runway at full speed, they have a very important decision to make, and that's, are we going to put this plane in the air, or are we going to dial back the throttle on the engine and keep this thing on the ground? Right now, whether we're in control of a division or a company or just maybe even our own little, team, we have to keep in mind one thing. How far are we going to go into Q2 before we realize we're about to crash? What is our point of demarcation on this runway? And that might for you look like a metric that you can pull at the end of April or May or even into the end of June that says, here's where we are on track to meeting our goals. Are we there? Are we not? What is that point? Is it this many dollars in revenue, this many sales made, this many servers installed, this many utility hours billed, whatever that looks like for you? Get a very clear vision on what that looks like in your COVID-19 world now. All right, the thing that's been vetted with your senior management team, the thing that they support, what does that look like? Where is that point on the runway? And once you know that, which by the way, most business leaders are not looking at right now, oddly, I'm in touch with more than 400 different industries. Most folks don't know. If I ask them, what is the metric you need to know about at the end of Q2 to know whether you're going to be successful or not? People really don't have that answer on the tip of their tongue. In today's world, you better have that answer on the tip of your tongue. Second question that addresses this, that we need to ask after that one, what do we do if it happens? What happens if we're underutilized in our billable hours by the end of June this year? What can we do to either mitigate the effect of that damage for our shareholders? What do we do to mitigate the effect and get some kind of Hail Mary sales in there, get some servers in places, maybe at a lower profit margin for us? What is the contingency plan behind that? And we'll dive into a little bit of that today during my session, but we need to have a plan in place. What's our runway? If we find ourselves at that point, do we throttle back the engines? Do we pull the plane off the runway? Do we tell the passengers that, free drinks for everybody because we're going to be on the runway a while? What is our plan of action at that point with our organizations, with our teams, with our divisions? So here's 2 important questions to ask in order to understand what that runway might look like and how to plan for it, and hopefully plan some innovation along the way. If we have to achieve that goal, and again, these are our survival metrics at this point, by that time, end of Q2, whatever time point you have when you need to, you need to be able to report results. That's the time point. With the resources that we just have available to us today, and that's very important because our post-COVID resources or our during COVID resources are a lot different than the resources we used to plan strategy back in January. So we have to reassess resources. With just the people we have on staff, with the expectations of however many dials out they're able to make, with this many expectations of billable utility hours that we're actually going to get paid for, How are we going to get that done? And you may take a quick look at that and say, Shawn, with our existing resources, we won't be able to get it done. Wouldn't you rather know that now and be honest about it than come end of Q2 and have to report out at the last minute, hey, boss, this just isn't going to happen? The chain effect that's going to cause, not only in the relationships inside your organization, but in your organization's profitability, you can mitigate that today by being honest about it today. And take that honesty up to your supervisor and say, in writing, trackable, sourceable content here, email chain to prove it. We're not going to be able to get that done with the resources we have. But that's an important question to ask. Now, more than likely, everybody on this call right now, you're here because you're a leader, because you know how to innovate, you know how to get stuff done. And you're probably like, Shawn, if we really put our minds to it, we could get it done. I'm willing to bet that's the majority of the folks here. If that's the case, I want you to ask this second question. If we have to achieve that goal by that time, but somehow we were able to access unlimited resources. Let's say the federal government decided it's giving every utility company and every provider to a utility company an extra bump in the CARES Act. Everybody gets an extra PPP loan fully forgiven. If that was the case, and suddenly we had to meet our numbers by that date, what would we begin to do it differently? Because we're still operating in a COVID world, mind you, but we have unlimited resources. Would we back that cash into our coffers, and so that way at least we have functional profitability? Would we invest in new technology? Would we hire more salespeople? Ask that question for yourself. What would we begin doing with unlimited resources in order to meet that goal in today's environment? The reason I want you to ask that question of yourself and your team is they're going to give you answers, and you're going to give yourself answers that you're going to be able to use. Because there's always a way to access some limited amount of resource. Resources aren't just involved in money. They're involved in time, networks, technology platforms, software we might not have had access to or didn't renew last year that we now could figure out, hey, if we had access to that CRM again, we could make this happen in a better way. But by asking yourself with unlimited resources, what could we begin doing to get this done? You'll be able to take advantage of some of the answers that you have, I guarantee it, especially if you ask it amongst your team and not just keep it inside yourself. So this guy right here, another military veteran, raise your hand if you know who that is. I don't think he's from the great state of Texas, but Aaron knows who it is. Who else knows who that is? No hands up, no hands up. All right, Aaron's the winner then. Aaron, next time we meet, I'll get you buy you a drink. That's Stanley McChrystal. Stanley McChrystal was in a similar situation that a lot of us are in, all right? But his situation happened back at 9/11. What he was doing at the time was leading the largest contingency of special operations forces on the planet, and they were all operating out of one place. Post 9/11, they realized, hey, our mission now has changed. Instead of just being geographically centric, we're going to be spread out all over the world. Stanley McChrystal's job was to make that a reality, to manage those teams remotely and make sure they were still accomplishing their objective at a high enough level. Now, the reason that he's important enough to bring into our conversation today is that the city of Boston, I think the entire state of Missouri, I read this morning, have hired Stanley McChrystal to bring what he learned in 9/11 into their operations today, the crisis and communications management that we need to survive COVID. City officials are now recognizing how valuable that is. Now, Stanley passed on 3 questions that we need to be asking our employees and our managers and our leaders as part of the transition from breaking ourselves up from, hey, we're all coming to the same office every day, now we're operating separately. How do we maintain performance? How do we get people what they need on time? And these are those actually, those processes and steps that he lays into place. So here are the 3 questions that we encourage all of you to ask your team members. What do we need to change right now? And this may not be related to your survival, your profitability goal, but just ask them this question and expect honest answers and encourage honest answers. What do we need to change right now? What do our managers need to know? What are we not sharing with our leaders that they need to know? And ask this of your managers too, right? What am I not telling you that you probably would benefit from knowing? And it might be, how much runway do we have, boss? That's a great response right now. And finally, what do my people need to receive or hear from their leaders right now? If you can ask those 3 questions, it will elicit all the information you need to pivot and innovate, assuming that you implement some of it, of course. But these are questions that very few leaders are taking the time to ask because they're assuming, hey, I'm in a crisis mode, my people are in crisis mode, just get the bare minimum done, keep the lights on. That's one way to go about doing business right now. And again, we all raised hands because we know people who are in that mode. I want to encourage you to do things a little differently, and that comes from asking these questions in a different way. So let's talk about contingency plans. What happens when we get far enough down the runway that this actually becomes a real thing for us? We're not going to meet our goal. What do we do? Well, we need to have external threats. actually established, all right? And what I did was I just took an example from an industry that deals in exports, planted it on top of what you do, but I'll walk you through how to make this applicable for you. Let's say that you rely on being able to export power across international lines. You're one of those utility companies that operates close to the Canadian or Mexican border. You've got this wonderful relationship where you get to export power, but hey, export's shut down right now for whatever reason. And let's say that happens past July 1st. On July 1st or before, you need to have a contingency plan in place. Your runway needs to be in effect. We hit this point, what are we going to do? What are we absolutely going to do? And what does that look like? Well, hey, how do we know this is in effect? And how you know that is you need to understand the very simple basic format here. Who will let who know when by how, all right? So if Jeremy and I are in business together and June 29th hits, and that's the point when we need to know to do things differently, because that's when our cash flow is going to run out, when we're not going to meet our sales goals, when we're not going to meet our allowable utility billing hours, whatever metric we're holding ourselves to, who is going to let who know? Is Jeremy going to let Shawn know? Is Jeremy going to let his wife know? Is Jeremy going to let somebody know? And is that the right person? Because otherwise these time crunches will happen and somebody's just going to sit on them. And this happens in organizations all the time, but especially in crisis. That's why I bring it to you. So somebody has to be very clearly assigned to let somebody else know that, hey, we've hit this point, boss, flags being waved. By when and how are they going to let us know? Very, very clear on your communication channel. Is this going to happen via email? Am I going to get a report at the quarterly meeting? What's going to happen? And then finally, what are the first three things we need to do? Map at least that initial part of your plan out. If we can tell by June 15th we're not going to hit our Q2 sales goals, what are the first three things we need to do? We need to let our chief revenue officer know. We need to reach out to these three distributorships or these three clients or these three utility companies. Map that out for yourself. What are our first three plans that we can begin putting into place to hopefully avert this crisis or minimize its effects? So really briefly touch on workforce composition, how we accelerate performance. Two things I want you to do, or three things really. Identify the top talent. So if you're in charge at all of hiring and firing, I want you to identify your top talent right now, because things might change in your organization and you might have to make some quick decisions. Identify who really do we need to keep on staff that we cannot accomplish our objective without. Make every effort to retain them, all right? And while you may not be able to give them any performance bumps or improvements right now as far as cash flow goes, what else can we do to retain them right now? And finally, keep in touch with everyone else, all right? The folks that you know you're gonna have to bring back on sometime soon. When we talk about accelerating performance, what does that look like as far as geographically disparate teams? So this really ties into continuous improvement processes, but what is the situation we're dealing with? This is it's a broken down SMART goal. If you're not using these already in your organizations, try them out, see if they work. When is this gonna happen? Who's responsible? Are they gonna do what? And finally, the last piece, and if you get nothing else from my little session today before I hand the mic over to Jeremy, how will we know? How will we know that this has actually been done? So many objectives are executed inside of utilities and organizations that serve them, and nobody takes the time to share that, hey, this has been accomplished, we can move on with our plan. The time that is wasted between something being achieved and somebody realizing it's being achieved and we can move on with the next step, that's a lag window that we cannot afford in the midst of COVID-19. And so make sure that you do tie in, how will someone know that this has happened? So before I turn the mic over to Jeremy, I don't want to get together with anybody at UTC at a future event and them come up to me with a cocktail in their hand and say, Shawn, you remember that performance you gave us, a little virtual session that you did? Boy, I should have asked you this, but I didn't, and this is what happened. Let's not have that conversation. I would much rather you have the conversation today of what do I do if? What do I do when? This is coming up, Shawn. What would you advise? No charge for this. There's my personal email address, my personal cell phone number. I want to hear from you if you're servicing utilities, if you're selling to utilities, if you're in UTC. We're making the time for you, Jeremy and I both. So before I turn it over to the guy who's going to explain about what we should be doing in a forward-facing way, what do we do to begin communicating better with our customers and maintaining our brand? This exactly how you get a hold of me. I want to make sure we make the best use of the hour. So if you have any questions that come up, pop them into the Q&A, pop them into the chat window. We want to hear about them. Jeremy, sir, the floor is yours.
All right. Give me a second to share a screen here.
And while some of these cats might know about me, Jeremy, make sure you tell us about you, because you're brand new.
I will certainly do that. All right. You
Oh,
able to see that okay?
yeah, Jeremy's going to the Blue Oyster Bar, or Brett's going to the Blue Oyster Bar.
All right, that's good stuff.
Yeah.
All right, so for those of you who don't know me, I'm Jeremy Knauff. Like Shawn mentioned, I also served in the Marine Corps. I was on the other end of his camera in that world. Following that, I left and started my own company. I've been in marketing since probably about 1999 and have been featured in pretty much every major publication for my marketing expertise. And that's pretty much the gist of that. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and jump into this here. I will tell you guys, if you have any questions, feel free to go ahead and interject. Let me just make sure that I can see the chat window here.
And I'll monitor the chat window too for you, sir.
What's that?
I will monitor the chat window, so I got you.
Awesome.
Yeah.
If you've got that, then I don't need to pull it up. So if you guys have any questions along the way, I'd rather have you just go ahead and throw them in while it's fresh on your mind. Don't wait till the end. So that being said, let's go ahead and kick this off. All right, so why is this not working? There we go. Well, hold on.
We love tech. It always works when you need it to.
Today is not my day for tech. Let's try this again. All right, there we go.
There you go.
All right, so right now, marketing is a lot like running through a minefield. All right, people are desperate. There's a lot of people who are out of work, or they don't have as much work as they normally would have. And that desperation leads to poor choices. On top of that, a lot of people are hypersensitive right now because of what they're going through. So that's making marketing a lot more challenging. So there is a right way and a wrong way to market right now. I'm going to give you a couple of examples. They're outside your industry, but here's an example of a wrong approach to this. This one I actually saw earlier on in this, prior to the lockdown, but this was an insurance agent who posted basically this sleazy fear-mongering approach. I'm going to go ahead and speculate that she didn't get any business out of it, but this is exactly the kind of thing we want to avoid. The other side of that is, when we're aggressively pushing sales, that can push people away. Now, the other thing I want to point out is, given what's going on, even if you do everything right, you could still get some negative blowback. So I'm going to give you guys another example, which again is outside of the industry, but it represents the same kind of problem that you could run into. So I've got this client that their normal business is drug testing. They do this nationally. They've got franchises all over the country. And they pivoted to offering COVID tests while a lot of the employees were, working from home and as a result, not being drug tested. So of course, everybody came out of the woodwork expecting this to be free and, decided that it was a scam and just blasted them on social media. They weren't doing anything wrong. They didn't, what they had was a legitimate product, but they still got blasted just for the fact that, people are sitting at home, they're on social media. It's nice and easy to complain. You can go on there and post a negative review or attack them in the comments. So whenever we're doing any kind of marketing right now in a situation like this, we have to be very aware not only of what we're trying to accomplish, but also how other people could perceive it. And we have to look beyond what would seem logical. We have to look at irrational people who are acting emotionally. So that's an important thing to think of whenever we're doing any kind of marketing in a time like this. What we need to be focusing on right now really is building a brand. So when we talk about this, we have to understand why this really matters. So when you have a brand, generally you can charge more, right? That's why, you buy the generic peas versus, Green Giant, and it's two very different prices. Or for the ladies here, or for the men who are married, you guys know the various purses that your wives like to buy. You get a purse at Walmart. I have no idea what the prices are, but it's a very different price than going to the Louis Vuitton store, right? So branding can affect how you're able to price your products or your services. But the other thing that branding does is it helps you to better weather the economic challenges. So when people view your company as a commodity, then you're going to be first on the chopping block, or you're going to be first for them to say, well, hey, we want some kind of reduced price or a payment plan or some kind of different structure. When you have a strong brand, they're less likely to do that because they're engaged. They're passionate about what you do, and they're passionate about the relationship they have with that brand. So I'm going to give you an example. I know when Shawn asked, we had a lot of veterans here and a lot of military families. So this is something that a lot of you guys can relate to, I think, especially the gentleman here. These little cheap green army men. Now I know most of us as little boys probably played with them. And for the ladies, I imagine maybe some of your brothers had these things. Super cheap garbage toy. You used to be able to buy this thing anywhere. And, you know, they were just super cheap, right? So on Amazon, here's 200 of them for about 10 bucks. Versus with a Toy Story branding, now we're looking at almost 35 bucks. So the only difference here is the branding. These are the exact same toys, same mold, same shape, everything. So how do we create a brand that actually matters to people? The first thing we have to do is we have to ask, why does your company, why does your brand exist, right? So I know we've got a lot of different, we've got some telecom companies in here, we've got some power companies in here. What problem are you solving? It's deeper than just what you do. You have to think about what exactly it is that you do in the bigger picture. So a couple of examples we can look at here is, I know some of you are probably familiar with at least several of these brands. Let's use Patagonia as an example. It's an outdoor products company for, like hiking, climbing, camping, stuff like that. But they go far deeper than that. They're not just selling the products. They actually donate a large portion of their revenue to environmental causes. So cleaning up various parks, or planting trees in places, or just other things that are protecting the environment in some way. Combat flip-flops, I know this is another great one. Shawn, I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they actually invest a portion of their revenue into education in Afghanistan. So they're actually educating the children as well as giving them jobs, right? So they're able to work. Part of these products are manufactured over there, and they're trying to basically change the whole war mindset over there. And this is especially powerful since this was created by a couple of Army Green Berets. So they've been, in this world, they know what it's like, and they know that the problem is, deeper than just going and killing the bad guys. It's, that there's no opportunities there. There's no education. So their brand goes far deeper than just some shoes that you're going to wear to the beach. So when we take that approach, we're going to create a very different type of company. We're going to create a type of company that people actually care about, the kind of company that people are going to get excited about and passionate about, that they'll tell their friends about, and that they'll, help support whenever they can. Now, the thing we have to remember here is that you cannot appeal to everyone, because what makes one person love your brand is going to make somebody else hate your brand. And that's just something we have to be comfortable with. That's just the nature of it.
Now, Jeremy, I actually created a poll that I'm going to launch on all the attendees here. So you're going to see a poll come through that I'd love to get your insight and input on. Right. And the poll is where you actually fit in the world of marketing with your organization. That's going to help Jeremy deliver the content that's probably going to be most useful to you. The first question on the poll, and you'll see it, just go ahead and tag in, you can choose one, is if you oversee marketers, so you're in the marketing department of your organization in some way. If you tag in on social media occasionally on behalf of your company or your brand, go ahead and throw in there. Or if you have no involvement with marketing outside of just, hey, it's on my business card. If I do something bad, it might reflect badly on my company's brand. That's about my involvement in marketing. And so right now, Jeremy, you can see the results there. We have most of our folks tagging in with, they have some involvement with their social media, but they may not oversee the people who do it directly. So hopefully that helps out.
Okay. Yeah, I don't seem to be able to see that for some reason, but
no worries.
All right, cool. So something I want to touch on here is, regardless of where you are in the company, whether you're the CEO, a salesperson, technical, some other role, all of these people in an organization need to understand what the brand stands for, what that company's core values are, and what makes them different than anybody else, right? Because when you've got something that differentiates you, that's going to give you a lot of ability. I mean, we all can see obviously how it affects the sales process, right? If you're out here selling technical solutions of some sort, and you've got a focus on, say, helping companies that most of their workforce is remote, then that's something that's going to have a huge impact if you're going up against just some general company. So when we can understand what makes a company different and how to represent that, how to convey that message, and at all levels within the company, it has a tremendous impact overall. All right, so what I want to touch on next is, let's talk about the kind of content that we should be using in our marketing to really build a strong relationship with our audience, with our potential customers, and with our actual customers. So what we need to be doing is we need to be sharing information that's useful, information that helps them in some way. So we've got two components here. On the business side, a lot of our clients are, we've got a business, our clients are also business owners. They have the same problems we have. So some of the type of content you could be sharing with them is information on, say, this PPP or other federal programs. There were some of these Facebook and Google grants. It was several $100 million that they were sharing, granting basically to businesses to help them market. There's also local grants. And what you're doing here is this kind of information doesn't necessarily directly tie into what you do, but it's information that's useful for them as a business owner. And I mean, you're going to know about it because you're keeping track of it for your own needs. But by sharing that, you're showing that there's more to this relationship. It's not purely a transactional thing. We all want each other to succeed. You're sharing something to help them, and there's no direct benefit to you. It's just the kind of thing that you're sharing to help them thrive and grow. So when you're doing that, it creates a different kind of relationship than constantly pitching and trying to sell your products or your services. So that's what we have right now to deal with. But in general, the content that we can be sharing is, anything that would be useful in a general business that they're operating in, right? So this could be how-to tutorials. You could be telling them how to use a particular piece of equipment, or how this particular piece of equipment could help them do their job better or easier or faster, safer, whatever the case may be. You may also have proprietary research or data that you've conducted, news in your industry. It could even be opportunities. There's all kinds of things that you could be sharing, but basically what we want to share is information that they can use, whether or not they become a customer or whether or not they buy anything from you right now. By doing that, you're demonstrating that there's more to the relationship than just that transaction of dollars, and that you're also demonstrating, your knowledge, your expertise, and authority. Now, on the consumer side, we can do something similar. I know we've got some people in here who are, in the power industry. Shawn talked earlier about some of the people who aren't paying or are paying smaller portions of their bill, whatever the case may be. We can take the same approach with these people, but it's going to be a little bit different. So for the power companies, you could be sending out messages to people about local job opportunities or, digital networking events that are going on. Various things where, everybody right now who's not what we call an essential worker, they're not out there in a job where they are forced to be there. A lot of these people are either at home, not working as much, or not working at all. So if you're sharing useful information with them, that's going to create a very different dynamic than pretty much any of the other companies that they're interacting with on a daily basis. And that's going to change the dynamic in a lot of ways. Aside from making them more receptive to actually taking your calls and continuing to use the services at the level that they had been using, it also is going to make them more likely to help out in some ways if there's something they can do to help you. So that's something we want to keep in mind. Now, when we talk about content, I want to emphasize that we can be looking at all different types, not just articles, not just videos. It could be anything. It could be an article, it could be a PDF, it could be a white paper. Video is great because it's easy to consume. Right now, video is actually accounts for a large portion of the traffic on the internet today. Another thing I want to touch on here is we've got a lot of opportunities for advertising right now. With the lockdown and all the businesses slowed down, we're seeing a lot of people pulling back or cutting their marketing entirely. So that's created an oversupply. A lot of these advertising platforms, Facebook, for example, Google is another one. They operate on like a bid model. So if there's not other people there who are willing to pay that amount, then it creates a great opportunity to get a lot of advertising at far lower cost than usual. So what we want to do there is continue to market, continue to get this information out there, but then we also want to leverage that and use that to work together with other methods. So I imagine most of you guys are probably familiar with email marketing to some degree. If you have an email list that you're using, awesome. If you don't, it's something you definitely should start using. And then within that list, we want to look at how we're segmenting it, right? So if we're looking at a particular type of company, we're segmenting our list by, maybe this is, I don't know, let's use somebody as an example here. Can we get somebody to chime in with what their business is and who their customers typically are? Let's do a real example here.
Let's go ahead and throw in the chat window, folks, if somebody could volunteer for us. Give us a line of what your business is and then a line of who you serve. And the first person in gets to have Jeremy use them as their example. And Carnell, why don't you give us an example, sir, so we know you're on the line. There we go. Okay, we got a couple. So telecom, IT integrator, small, medium business, and large companies.
Okay. All right, great. So for telecom, IT integrator, I'm going to assume that this would be like you're working with like call centers and places like that. Would that be accurate?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. All right. So you've probably got several different types of clients. So you have a call center, maybe one is for an insurance company, maybe one's for a pharmaceutical company, maybe one is for, I don't know, nutritional supplements. If you segment your lists based on these different types of industries, now you've got the whole list, but you can send tailored messages to certain ones. So maybe you send a message, an email message to all of these pharmaceutical companies where the copy is tailored specifically to them in a way that's going to engage with them. And then your images within that email are going to be images maybe of doctors or lab technicians or whatever. Whereas with the insurance company, if we're talking about home insurance, for example, you're targeting that message to, them, but it's towards the insurance industry. And then the images might be, families at home enjoying time together. So when you can segment your list, you can tailor your messages. And when the message is tailored, it's going to have a far greater effect, right? If Shawn and I started talking about, I don't know, something Marine Corps related, right?
Eating crayons.
Eating crayons, all that good stuff. If we started talking about that and some other Marine happened to be there and overheard us, you've been in this situation before. What happened, Shawn?
Oh, you cannot keep a Marine quiet. Carnell knows about that.
Exactly. They're going to run up. We're going to start sharing all kinds of stories. And it's because we know that we're speaking the same language. We understand each other. So it's the same approach with your marketing. If you're communicating in a way that resonates with them more powerfully, then you're going to get far better results. Now, in order to do that effectively, you're going to have to segment your list. You're going to have to use tags or break your list up. Most of the platforms, whether it's Aweber, Infusionsoft, MailChimp, whatever you're using, I know a lot of you guys already have marketing departments. You've got your systems that you're using. Pretty much any system nowadays has the ability for segmentation. So just keep that in mind. Let's see. Let's jump to the next one here. All right. We kind of covered this a little bit a second ago here, but we really need to make sure that we're communicating in a way that they understand. So I've got a technical background. I tend to get very deep into very complex topics sometimes. And I have a tendency to talk over people's heads, talk in a way that they don't understand sometimes. And I think most of us as business owners or as, even people within a business, like we're so entrenched in what we do that it's easy for that to happen. So we need to be very conscious of the language that we're using and make sure that it is the same language that our customers or our clients are using. You know, for example, if I'm talking about search engine optimization, I might be talking about algorithms and PageRank and Google patents and things like this, when, you know, really what my clients would typically be talking about is, you know, just wanting more web traffic. So we have to be very careful to use their language and just kind of bring it down to a level that they understand. There's a lot of things that we can do as a starting point to get that information. One of the great things we can look at is the frequently asked questions. You know, what are our salespeople or our customer service people hearing from the end clients, the end customers? What kind of questions are they hearing? So that's a good starting point. From there, there's a ton of keyword research tools available. There's a great one called Answer the Public. I'm going to go ahead and drop a link in the chat window here. But basically, you can put in a particular topic, and it's going to turn out a ton of questions that people have asked, and they're compiling this data from a variety of sources. So what I'll go ahead and do here, let's see if I've got a tab that I can drag over here. Let's bring this over here. Come on. All right, so let's go with Les's question here and see if we can do anything. I don't know if that'll give us anything. We'll see how this turns out. But basically what it's going to do is it's going to give you this topic wheel of all these different questions that people have asked. Yeah, that's not very helpful there. All right.
What about utility payments? Something that might be a little more general.
Yeah, let me. Let's do this. Les, can you give me a little bit more specific topic in your industry that might make sense? How about this? How about call center VoIP? I suspect that'll work. Is it still spinning? Yeah.
Let's just say normally it gives better results.
Yeah, yeah. Usually it gives you hundreds upon hundreds of topics, and then you can expand on any of those topics. There's another great tool called BuzzSumo. I'll drop a link in there for that as well. Based on how technology is working for me today, we're not going to use an actual example of that though. So BuzzSumo, you can look up topics on pretty much anything, and it will tell you like how many links people have pointed towards it, you know, from their websites, or how many social shares on various networks it's got. And that gives you a really good indication as to what kind of content is going to resonate with your audience. So you could have a great idea for a piece of content, but if nobody's interested in it, there's no value in creating it. But if you run your ideas through some of these tools, it'll give you an idea as to what kind of interest there is in these particular topics. Now, I will give you a caveat here. Just because a tool says that there's no volume or there's no, you know, social engagement around a particular topic, that doesn't always mean that it's true. We were doing some work for a client where there was a particular term that in literally every single keyword research tool we had used, it said that it had no traffic whatsoever. However, we had access to a friendly competitor's analytics account, and we could see that they were getting thousands of visits every single month from that term. So if a question or a topic is important to your customers, don't be afraid to create content on it. Just use these tools as kind of a way to generate some ideas. Don't treat them like black and white. It's not an exact science sometimes. One of the other things we need to look at doing is when we're doing all of this, oops, let me switch out here. There we go. So as we're doing all of this marketing, we also need to look at how we're properly leveraging various forms of automation. Now, when I talk about automation, I want to be very clear that we're not talking about the sleazy kind of automation that you guys see. Can I get a show of hands? I suspect most of you guys probably use LinkedIn. Have we ever got a message followed by another message, followed by another message? And it's like this dude is just having a conversation all by himself. How many people have
I know I have.
Yes. All right. So that's exactly what we want to avoid. That's a terrible approach. It irritates people. It makes you look tone deaf, and it just makes it look like you don't care. So we're not going to do that. However, there's a lot of other things we can do to automate certain aspects of our marketing. So I'll give you a great example. Let's say you've got a contact form on your site. Somebody contacts you about, you know, your telecom services or your IT services, whatever may be the case. For most people, the way that works is somebody fills out the form, it sends a message to the website owner, it sends a message to the person who filled it out, and then that's where it dies. And you're leaving so much opportunity on the table when you do that. So what you can do is you can actually integrate that. So I've got a similar setup with, we've got landing pages on our site within my business. And if somebody goes to a page for a webinar, for example, and fills out that same type of contact form, then what it does is it sends the message to me and it sends a message to them, just like a regular contact form would, but it also adds them to a mailing list. And it also adds them as a registrant to a Zoom webinar. And then within that, it sends them to once they've confirmed, it sends them to a second landing page where it then encourages them to go and follow my company on social media. And then it gives them an opportunity to schedule a call. If they then schedule that call, then by doing that, then that changes how they're tagged within our email system. So you can set up the same things here. And you can take it a step further, and you can, you know, we talked about creating this content. You can actually put that content behind one of these forms. So, you know, let's say everybody right now is working from home. This is not a secret. So most people are not, like, their IT security is not on point. They're, you know, they have outdated AV software or whatever. They don't have a good firewall. I mean, you guys are the experts in that. But they're all working from home. They're exposing their company to risk. So you could create a piece of content talking about how, you know, here's top 10 things that you need to know about working from home from a, you know, IT security perspective or something like that. They go over there, they fill out the form to get this PDF download or a video that they can access. That form can then put them on your mailing list. It can give them the opportunity to schedule a call with you right out of the gate. It can send them to another page where they now can go and encourage them to follow you on Facebook or YouTube or whatever. So now you've got all these touch points just by them going to that contact form to get that piece of content that you've created for them, that once it exists, it lives forever. And this will just be what we call a lead magnet from now until infinity. Now they've contacted you. They've also been added to your mailing list. They've been encouraged to follow you on social media. And now over here on social media, you can continue marketing to them. Over here on email, you can continue marketing to them. And then if you set your website up properly, you can set a Facebook and a Google Pixel. So now you can follow them with your ads everywhere. So you've got all of these tools that you can leverage together to create far greater results without creating any additional work other than, you know, just setting it up in the first place. So I think
we're already pushing time, Jeremy. So I want to make sure we do allow a little bit of Q&A here.
Yep.
If anybody has questions directly, pop them in the chat window, pop them in the Q&A box. Want to make sure that we're able to address them while we got them here. And then if you wouldn't mind, Jeremy, would you load back up your contact information so folks have it? Perfect. That's exactly it. Yeah. So Carnell, feel free to unmute yourself, sir. I can't do it for you unless you got like a toilet flushing, in which case I don't want to unmute you. Leave it to a Marine to use Zoom for that purpose for sure. But yeah, I mean, we're here for you. That's Jeremy's contact info. You have mine already. Reach out to Carnell if you miss it and you want to get a hold of us after the fact. We're both willing to make time for everybody here because UTC has supported me a lot. Jeremy promised Carnell as a Marine that he would do everything he could for you. So, hey, reach out. I mean, that's why we're here.
Yeah, if anybody's got any questions, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to answer any questions that I can. And if there's anything I can do, just let me know.
Yeah, I appreciate it, guys. Well, everybody stay safe out there. Look forward to seeing everybody at a future UTC event, virtually or live, hopefully live. We can get back together again. So it was a lot of fun, everybody. We'll catch the recording, make sure it gets out to everybody via Carnell as well.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Absolutely. Yeah. See you soon.